In the next hour, we will get another update from NTSB investigators with new details on the deadliest U.S. air crash in 20 years. There is new information to tell you about, though. The midair collision of a military helicopter and an American Airlines passenger plane has claimed 67 innocent lives, and new footage has emerged of the moment of impact that sent both aircrafts hurtling into the Potomac. Emergency crews have recovered the remains of at least 41 of the victims. 28 of them have been positively identified. The next of kin have been informed for 18 victims, and 26 have yet to be found. Investigators say that they hope to locate the remaining victims when they salvage the jet's fuselage. Investigators have recovered both black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder from the passenger jet, which are now at NTSB labs. The NTSB telling NBC News that the black boxes are in, quote, good condition, and the data is right now being analyzed. The search for the helicopter's black box is ongoing. There's new reporting that suggests that staffing at the air traffic control tower at Reagan National Airport was not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic. Quote, the controller who was handling helicopters in the airport's vicinity was also instructing planes that were landing and departing, jobs that are typically assigned to two controllers rather than one. The FAA has announced it is indefinitely restricting helicopter flights near Reagan National Airport. Meanwhile, there are questions about the Black Hawk helicopter and whether it was flying too high. New York Times reports this, quote, among the questions facing investigators is whether the Black Hawk helicopter left its designated flight path as it approached the airport. 4 people briefed on the matter said that the helicopter appeared to have been flying higher than air traffic control had approved, and that it was, quote, above 300 feet when it was supposed to be flying below 200 feet, and it was at least a half a mile off of the approved route when it collided with the commercial jet. That is where we start today with Archer Aviation Chief Safety Officer and former acting FAA Administrator Billy Nolen. Also joining us is former NTSB board member Kitty Higgins. I want to start with you and what we've learned over the last 24 hours, Billy. What is sort of leaping out to you as perhaps the most fruitful areas of the investigation right now?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on today. I go back to Robert Isom, the CEO of American Airlines, and his initial comments from DCA, from Reagan the other day, right? This is an otherwise normal night. You have an expectation. You've got American Eagle 5342. They're on short final. They're 30 to 40 minutes away from landing. So as far as they're concerned, they've got a clear path. They see the runway. It's visual operation. And then you have instructions from air traffic control to the U.S. Army helicopter to the crew as to whether they had the preceding traffic in sight, and that was positively acknowledged, and they were told to maintain visual separation. So there's nothing abnormal about that kind of a clearance on a clear night. So this is kind of what you would normally expect. I've been in that situations before where I've had to maintain visual separation, whether both daytime and nighttime over the course of my 45 years of flying, helicopters, airplane as a, airline captain, et cetera. So I think, and I'm not here to speculate, but what I would say, I think one of the focus will be, what did the Black Hawk crew see? They called the traffic in sight. Did they misidentify? I don't know. I don't want to speculate about that. But I do think the NTSB, and I will say I'm a big fan. They do an incredible job. So certainly they'll get to the bottom of this, and I hopefully they'll have the voice recorder and the flight data recorder from the Black Hawk here, recovered quickly.
Kitty, what are your thoughts as you see more information start to come out about these final moments?
Well, I think the issues you've identified are the ones that I've certainly heard about. I think the voice recorder, as has been suggested, will indicate both what the crew was saying to each other, but also what communications they had with the air traffic controllers. It's clear that something was awry, and the numbers that you've cited, the 200 feet, and is what I also understand is where they should have been. Why they weren't there, if they weren't there, is a whole other question that has to be resolved. And whether they mistook the flight, another flight for the helicopter is I guess, still in doubt. We don't know, but that's why we need the voice recorders and the data recorder to see exactly where they were and what they were saying, both to each other and to air traffic control. I mean, I think the other issue that has not been raised specifically is why isn't there any kind of alert system on the helicopter? Apparently there was a TCAS system on the American Airlines flight, which is standard, but it only operates at a certain altitude. And in this day and age, the technology exists for not to rely just on the human conversations, but also on the mechanical ability of these aircraft to notify each other and to alert the crews. And that, I think, is something that definitely has to be looked at. We have the technology. It hasn't been deployed the way it should have been, I think, and hopefully that will be discussed as well.
I mean, I want to share some reporting from a friend of this program, Carol Leonnig in the Washington Post, because it sounds like there have been other close calls where some of these issues may have been surfaced. She reports in the Washington Post this, quote, on Tuesday night, just 24 hours before a deadly collision between a military helicopter and a regional jet over the Potomac River near Reagan National Airport, a different regional jet coming in for a landing at the airport alerted the air traffic control tower that it had to make a second approach. The cockpit crew quickly reported the reason to the tower. A helicopter had appeared near the flight path. Flight tracking maps that night show an unidentified aircraft almost directly under Flight 4514 on the Potomac River as it was attempting to make its final descent. And just before the aircraft gives up on landing and instead makes a loop to try to make a second approach. I mean, Kitty, what does that reporting tell us about how congested or perhaps how precarious these landings have maybe been for a while?
Well, I think it reflects the situation that we're learning more about at National Airport, an airport that was designed for, I think it's 15 million passengers. It's now handling 25 million. That's a big increase. The space hasn't included because it's basically the footprint of the airport hasn't changed in all these years. It's a beautiful airport, and it's incredibly convenient for those who want to fly in and out of Washington. But it does make for a lot of congestion. And the question I think that will again have to be addressed is how many of those? It's not just a one-off. We had the reporting that you're describing, but how many other incidents have there been that have been near misses that weren't reported because there were no fatalities involved, no accidents involved? That's what the NTSB will look at. That's what they're good at. And that, and along with the issue of how many controllers were on duty, were we understaffed, has been reported, and what should be done about that?
Obviously, the reason these stories stop every human being in their tracks is the randomness. It could have been anyone. I want to share some of what we're hearing from the families of the victims with both of you.
My close friends who were world champions, a husband and wife. I grew up with them. I compete against them. I knew them since we were 14. It's extremely heartbreaking news for me.
Kindest person I've ever met. She went above and beyond and then took a giant leap over that. You know, when it came for doing things for other people, for me, for her parents, for my parents.
I look after those people and they were my inspiration. I love all these people, and they really support me.
Life is short. Hug your loved ones. Tell them you love them. When they're getting on a flight, check up on them. Text your family when you land.
Billy, he lost his wife on that flight. The others from the skating community. I imagine everyone who does the work of trying to understand what went wrong carries the knowledge that for all of the victims' families, there's forever after, there's life before and there's life after. How does that weigh on investigators?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, right? I think the challenge of this of our aerospace and our air transportation industry, which continues to grow, continues to expand. Let me be clear. We have made great strides. We started with the commercial aviation safety team in 1997 that the FAA and industry worked together on. We then 10 years later, and that goal was to reduce the number of fatal incidents by 80%. They did it by 82%. And 10 years on, they said, let's expand the aperture. They created the Aviation Safety Analysis and Information Sharing, or SIAS as it's called, that meets twice a year. That was an effort to bring in universities, bring in our nation's military, bring in the airlines and maintenance, repair organizations, et cetera. So we continue to do the work. As you know, this is a layered approach. So when we think about safety, it's certainly in commercial aviation, right? All of these layers, we have controls, we have procedures, and it is absolutely right. When we have a very tragic event like this, and what we say to ourselves is that we never, ever rest on our record. We've gone 16 years in the United States without a fatal commercial passenger accident, right? In that time, we've moved over 13 billion people, but it doesn't matter. When you get to this point where something horrific happens that you don't expect to happen, it's a good time for us to pause. So it's good for the FAA to let's take a pause. Whether that'll be permanent or not, who knows? But it's a good time for us to pause and reflect, to say, if there are weaknesses in our system, they address it. If there are weaknesses in our procedures, let's figure out what we do. Let's work together so that we can give the public that sense of confidence that they expect and really that they should demand, right? This is how our air transportation system works.